These are two that did not always get along. Stefanik was definitely a Trump skeptic, but over the years she's warmed up to him. She said she talks to him every week. And a couple weeks ago, she was on Meet the Press and really just delivered a very strong performance that hit every note from the Trump talking points. And from there, I predicted that, yes, she would be the nominee.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with commentary editor Conn Carroll. Conn, you wrote that the primary is essentially over, and actually has been for some months, and you trace the start of that runaway lead from Donald Trump to when the Manhattan District Attorney indicted him last year. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, for a look at what this, for a graphical look at this, I would just advise people to go to realclearpolitics.com, go to the Republican 2024 presidential election, and you can just see the chart over time, and you can see DeSantis closing ground, and then you hit April 1st, and then just diverges. And so it's just a very clear demarcation. And then when you just go back in time and say, what happened in early April that all of a sudden made Trump so much more popular? And it's the indictments. It's had a rally around the flag effect, except not the flag in this point, or it's a rally around Trump effect. Republicans see the Biden, with Democrats and the Biden Department of Justice targeting Trump. It makes him seem like he is being persecuted. There's a natural feeling to defend him, even for people that are Trump skeptical, especially when you have at the very same time the Biden DOJ very clearly going easy on Hunter Biden. So when you see this, special treatment for Hunter but persecuting Trump, there's a natural partisan instinct to rally around Trump as the leader of the party, and that's what doomed DeSantis.
And so now that Donald Trump is cruising towards the nomination here, there's a lot of talk about who his VP pick was going to be, and you correctly, it seems, identified Elise Stefanik as a potentially really serious contender for his VP pick earlier. If you want to do your little victory lap on that.
These are two that did not always get along. Stefanik was definitely a Trump skeptic, but over the years she's warmed up to him. She said she talks to him every week. And a couple weeks ago, she was on Meet the Press and really just delivered a very strong performance that hit every note from the Trump talking points. And from there, I predicted that, yes, she would be the nominee. And so then this week, we've seen reporting that, number one, she is going with him to New Hampshire to campaign with him on the stump, something which you've not seen from Marjorie Taylor Greene or Kristi Noem or any of the names that have been floated. So clearly he likes her. And there's been some other reporting behind the scenes that Trump is telling his allies, what do you think about Stefanik? Is she the one? I think she could do it. I do think it's a done deal.
The Supreme Court is poised to play an outsized role in deciding how 2024 rolls along, but also they're deciding some other really serious cases this term, and one of them, oral arguments, occurred this week. It's challenging something called the Chevron deference doctrine. Tell us about that.
Sure. So in 1984, you had the Environmental Protection Agency under Ronald Reagan. They actually narrowed a provision of the Clean Air Act that made it easier for oil companies like Chevron to refit their refineries and bring them up to date. So then you had the National Resources Defense Council actually sue the EPA to stop this rewriting of the regulation and to go back to the old regulation. The NRDC won at the lower court, and then the Chevron actually intervened and appealed to the Supreme Court. So that's why the case is titled Chevron versus NRDC, National Resources Defense Council. The Supreme Court at the time ruled for Chevron and said, look, which was essentially ruling for the EPA, look, courts can't micromanage how agencies regulate all of these very complicated matters. So we're going to say, as courts, if the statute is at all ambiguous in any way, we're just going to defer to the courts and let them decide it. And the thinking was that this would provide more stability in the policy arena. But what has happened since then is that agencies, which are politically controlled by the White House, have taken and really abused that deference, that they take the maximum amount of deference that they have under statute and really just flip a law 100% back from what the previous administration has done. So, whether it's immigration, energy, taxes, you can look at issue after issue and see how policies from federal agencies have flipped like a light switch, 180 degrees difference from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden, and this doesn't create stability. So now you have the courts arguing, or the conservatives are arguing, look, in order to provide stability, in order to make Congress to actually come in and fix these problems, we need to undo Chevron deference. We need to send agencies the message that, look, you really have to have actual authority under the statute in order to regulate in these areas.
And one other area that the Supreme Court is wading into is potentially going to decide how blue states and cities can deal with their homelessness problems. Tell us about that case.
Right. So not blue states in particular. So it's
they have the worst problems,
yes,
I guess.
It's a Ninth Circuit decision. So there's a decision in 2015. It came out of Boise, Idaho. Boise was trying to basically enforce anti-vagrancy laws, saying that people weren't allowed to just sleep wherever they wanted within the city, and they were being fined and moved into jails and probably trying to push into rehab, which is really the answer that most of the homeless people need. But the ACLU came in and said, look, you can't persecute someone just for their status of being homeless. So they said any anti-vagrancy laws were a violation of someone's Eighth Amendment right to cruel and unusual punishment. Now, cruel and unusual punishment has been used by the court before to say that certain punishments are outside the realm of the Constitution. So, for example, the Supreme Court has found that life sentences for juvenile offenders is cruel and unusual punishment. But those juvenile offenders were still prosecuted, convicted, and served some type of time. This would be the first instance ever of the Eighth Amendment being used to say, you just can't enforce this crime at all, because this is basically getting rid of all anti-vagrancy laws. So this has then made it impossible for many cities to clear out homeless encampments. So you even had the mayor, the democratically elected mayor of San Francisco, held a rally in front of San Francisco's federal court, begging the court to overturn this decision, saying, look, you are preventing our city from being able to clear homeless encampments, and it's making our city worse. And that's a Democratic mayor answering that question. So separately, in Grants Pass, Oregon, you had the same issues play out, and the Grants Pass, the city lost that case, and so the Supreme Court finally decided to hear that Grants Pass, Oregon case, and so we should be hearing oral arguments on this anti-vagrancy homelessness issue this spring.
Well, Conn, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
You can get more writing from Conn and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.